Hi, I'm Nathan from Serious Geeks, and this Tactica video is going to cover Terminator squads for Codex Space Marines. I'm going to do all three types of Terminator squads that you can take in a Space Marine army all together. I'm not going to cover the Deathwing specific special Terminators because they have their own attributes that are quite powerful, but I might mention them in passing when it comes to some of the uses that you can generally use. Anyone who knows me knows that I absolutely adore Terminator squads, so this is quite a delight for me. The 9th edition Space Marine Codex, giving them 3 wounds apiece, has really brought them to life. It's made them a really specifically powerful unit that is quite relevant on the tabletop now, especially with a focus on objectives and their ability to teleport. My usual favourite starting point is the datasheet, it's the stat line. Let's cover that. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, all Terminator squads have the exact same stat line. I do miss the days when Cataphracti and Tartarus Terminators had their own stat lines, but we're not going to that. It was great fun, but anyway, moving on, we have the basic stat line for all Terminators. Movement 5, fairly slow. Weapon skill 3+, and ballistic skill 3+, Space Marine standard. Strength 4, toughness 4, again, Space Marine standard. 3 wounds, which we love, it's absolutely delicious. 2 attacks, they are a veteran. Leadership 8, standard. I mean, it goes up to leadership 9 in practical terms with the sergeant. And a 2+ armor save, which is very nice. So immediately you see a big beefy unit. They have toughness 4, wounds 3, 2 attacks each, and 2+ save. So they're quite a tough little solid core. They operate between 5 models and 10 models, and depending on the sizes you want, it depends on their relevant use. Most armies will just have a 5-strong unit plus some other units that are going to attack in tandem with them and generally be quite a good sort of support unit for everyone around them. They're a solid little core. They are very vulnerable at 5-strong to suffering a few easy casualties that might occur through bad luck or concentration of fire. Say a few melters get in range close. One multi-melter, for example, can kill 2 quite easily and put the squad down to a mere 3 models. These sort of small units are much more cost effective and therefore you can spread points elsewhere in the list. Such a smaller unit enables you to basically concentrate on your secondaries and your primary objectives to score as many points as possible as quickly as possible, and it's quite a nice little way of putting a hard-boiled centre into an otherwise difficult attack that may lack a bit of numbers, especially with teleport attacking. Now, the armament is the main difference between these squads. Starting with the Assault Squad, they have Lightning Claws or Thunderhammer and Storm Shields. The Lightning Claw is a great weapon elsewhere in the list. Most models that can take one that are not characters should take one. Probably the exception to this would be the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield. The reason for that is because thanks to the Storm Shield, Terminator squads go to a 1+ armor save and they have a 4+ invulnerable save, which makes them incredibly difficult to shift with those 3 wounds apiece. Having damage 3 attacks as well is very good, and the -1 to hit roll is, it's annoying. Hitting on 4+ is terrible, but you can overcome that with some stratagem use later on. So when it comes to Terminator Assault squads, I heartily recommend the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield on every model. It's just a no-brainer. It's a really powerful weapon and a really decent defense that the unit will pretty much be the hardest unit to shift on your army. Maybe Blade Guard or Transhuman, but 1+ armor save is incredible. The standard Terminator squad, they all come with Storm Bolters and Power Fists. The Sergeant comes with a Power Sword. It's a fairly utilitarian sort of loadout. You can do a load of damage to infantry whilst also charging in and squashing things with Power Fists. Power Sword is not a bad choice to help you cut through a few lighter infantry for the Power Fist to survive. Of course, hitting on a 4+ again with those Power Fists can be a bit of a pain, but like I said, we can overcome that. This unit has a bit more flexibility in that it can have 3 heavy weapons. The Assault Cannon, which is great at killing light infantry. The Cyclone Missile Launcher, which is 2 missile launchers with slightly lower range rolled into one. You get to also keep your Storm Bolter, which is kind of nice. And the Heavy Flamer, which is now range 12, heavy D6, strength 5 isn't too bad. Does hit automatically. It's an anti-infantry weapon, it's okay. Salamanders might prefer it, but overall it'll probably lose out, in my view, to the other heavy weapons. Now, being Terminators, you'd think that they wouldn't mind the -1 to hit from heavy weapons, but they are affected by the Assault Cannon and Cyclone Missile Launcher -1 to hit for being heavy weapons. So Again, we can use Fury the First, as I mentioned in hinting with the other Terminator Assault squad. It's not a bad shout. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to get the heavy weapons off, you're going to have to really concentrate on that, because 4+ to hit is not that good. Now in melee, it's also possible to change your power fist to chain fists, which are not bad little weapons, -4 AP, which is good. Only does D3 damage, which is standard, and against infantry it's still going to be a threat, but it does give you a flat 3 damage against vehicles. If you think you're going to come up against a load of vehicles, then 1 or 2 of these weapons in your squad are not going to be too bad. The damage 2 from a power fist is more reliable against most targets, but against vehicles you'll cut through them. Crucially, at the moment they are the same amount of points as a power fist, so it's worth taking in that regard of 1 or 2 models just to beef up the capabilities of the unit in case, say, a dreadnought gets too close. Now, moving on to the weapons of a Relic Terminator squad, this is where the deviation becomes quite high. All of them come standard with a combi bolter, which, as we all know, is just a twin bolter or storm bolter. No rules anymore that are any different. They all come with a power fist as standard, including the sergeant, which is a marked difference, as what we're used to seeing is a power sword on normal Terminator squads. Now, the deviance really starts to go wild when you start looking at the war gear options. We'll start with the heavy weapons because that's fairly easy. Heavy flamer works the same as the Terminator squad. It's okay. It's not bad if you drop in to do extra damage on infantry. I don't really recommend it because heavy D6, it's a bit swingy, it's not very reliable. Reaper autocannon, well, it's a bit longer ranged. It's heavy 4 shots, so it's basically like a storm bolter in that regard, and it's always going to be in range. It's strength 7, -2 AP, which is really nice, and crucially it means that if you're firing at vehicles, you can get an extra couple of wounds off, and it's not bad at killing infantry. So I kind of recommend the Reaper autocannon. It's a nice little weapon, and it does quite a lot of damage of what the twin bolters are going to be firing at. It contributes in that regard, kind of like an assault cannon. Up to 1 model for every 5 in the squad can have a grenade harness, which again, it's a swingy weapon, but it's a free extra little choice of just putting D6 strength 4 -1 attacks on the target, and it's blast as well, which means if you are firing at, say, an orc mob, you can get 6 off shots quite nicely. 12-inch range, so it's more of a contributionary weapon system rather than a die-hard choice. I would normally give it to a heavy weapon specialist or the sergeant, simply because I want to keep those models alive the longest, and it means that my firepower degrades the very least. The only problem with that is sometimes you put the Reaper autocannons a little bit further away because of their increased range and the necessities of when you teleport in. Looking at the melee weapons, any model can have a lightning claw, which, as we know, is a quite effective weapon. The beauty of Relic Terminator squads is that you can keep your ranged attack and only take 1 lightning claw, which means that you still have a relatively good melee contribution to the table, but can shoot at the same time, giving you the ability to threaten multiple targets on the drop. You can also go all in, give models 2 lightning claws, so you might want to have 1 model with 2 lightning claws just to bulk out the amount of attacks you're getting. I don't generally recommend this because the combi bolter is so good alongside a single lightning claw, gives you so much utility and effectiveness, but some people might put 2 of these in the squad whilst the rest have power fists, and that isn't a bad shout either. Any model in the unit can have a chain fist, that includes the sergeant. You can potentially give a model with 3 attacks a chain fist, which means they'll be slightly better at killing vehicles, as I mentioned earlier. Again, if you've got a squad that might come up against some vehicles, particularly dreadnoughts that have an inbuilt -1 duty eternal to the damage roll, then yeah, I'd say throw in a chain fist or 2. It's a nice bit of utility. It's 3 points wise compared to a power fist too. Lastly, for melee weapons, the sergeant can replace his weapon, his power fist, with a power sword, which it brings him into standard line with normal Terminators. On that note, the Relic Terminator sergeant can replace his combi bolter with either a plasma blaster or a Volkite charger. The plasma blaster is quite interesting. It's a range 18 assault 2 plasma weapon, which means if it overcharges, it goes up to strength 8, damage 2, can kill the bearer. Generally, this is ill thought of, unless of course you've got an Apothecary nearby, in which case it's a great version of the weapon, and I'll go on that later on. The Volkite Charger is pretty good. It's heavy 2, which we don't like heavy weapons, but it's a strange range of 20, which isn't bad. Strength 5, damage 2, no AP, so it's not brilliant in that regard, but it does obviously have the magic damage 2 without killing yourself. But it also can do mortal wounds if you have an unmodified wound roll of a 6. So, it's a nice little addition. It kind of simulates blasting through models. It's okay. For me, I like the AP. Minus 3 AP is very nice, so I would generally go with a Plasma Blaster in that regard. Now, why take a Relic Terminator squad over, say, a normal Terminator squad or a Terminator Assault squad? Well, the reason is you want to be able to do multiple things that the other two aren't best at. So, a Relic Terminator squad can have Lightning Claws for being a superior close combat force than a standard Terminator squad, but they can also retain some shooting, which is basically eliminated with a Terminator Assault squad. Certain armies like to have a very definitive sort of attack play or a very definitive way of using a unit. If you're an Ultramarines player like me, you might really enjoy the idea of dropping down, putting loads of shots that are AP -1 down the table, and then charging another target, and then killing that in close combat. You can do that with other Terminator squads, but this one does it a little bit better, because it's retaining the same sort of effective shooting, but has a superior close combat capacity. So if we move on, if we look at the abilities of the unit, as we can probably imagine, they all have Angels of Death, combat squads that nobody uses, and Teleport Strike, which is great. Their poor movement of 5 is basically completely eliminated and circumnavigated by the Teleport Strike ability. It means you can directly threaten an objective or a table quarter or an enemy unit straight away from turn 2, and there's nothing the opponent can do to stop it without just trying to block you out with their own units. Gives you a bit of interplay, because in turn 1 you can try and make some space for them by killing units or moving units. It also makes the opponent move more cautiously, potentially, if you want to teleport down in their back line right behind their objective scoring units. They might have to hang back and therefore they lose range. There's a lot of options that are opened up by just the threat of a teleport strike. Also, rather nicely, using a Chaplain, you can generally make it so that your Terminator unit is highly likely to make its charge from a teleport strike. So when I talk about support units and models that can help a Terminator squad later on, I'll go over the Chaplain in a bit more detail, but suffice to say, it gives you a great opportunity to be able to almost guarantee your charges and put a real threat on the opponent's chances of winning a game. Now, other special rules: Crux Terminatus. Every model will have a 5+ invulnerable save. Terminator Assault squads don't care for this if they've got a 4+ invulnerable save, but other than that, it's quite a nice thing to have. It means that you can sometimes deflect those really powerful melter shots when they come in. I myself really struggle to make my 5+ saves, but I've seen people make plethora of them on the table, and it's really frustrating. All Terminators can be either Deathwing if they're Dark Angels, or Wolfguard if they're Space Wolves. That's kind of what we expect to make them fit into those armies. And the very last ability I'm going to talk about is actually a War Gear option. It's a Teleport Homer, but it's basically like an ability anyway, so that's why I've lumped it in here. Terminator Assault squads and standard Terminator squads have access to this. The Relic Terminators do not. Once per battle, at the start of your movement phase, you remove a unit with this ability from the tabletop, and then you can either redeploy them wholly within your deployment zone, more than 9 away from enemy models, like a standard teleport, or within 3 inches of a friendly chapter model, but again more than 9 inches away from enemy models. Crucially, you have to make sure you do it before the end of the battle, otherwise the unit counts as being destroyed. I don't really like this ability. I see the utility of it. It gives someone the option of moving 1 or 2 models all the way back to the other side of the table, away from the opponent, to keep them alive. But really, I just don't see that being relevant in many games. And also, you lose an entire turn with them, and who wants to do that? You've got an important model there, you've got important units. It can be useful sometimes if you need to keep models alive, or you need to jump back and take a home objective that has no one left on it. But ultimately, I just don't think it's going to have much utility outside that, and many people will not see it in most games. Right, lastly, we have the faction keywords: Imperium, Adeptus Astartes Chapter, standard, what we expect. Keywords: Infantry, Core, which is very good. It means that they can have their rerolls when they need it. Terminator, you kind of expect that. And then either Relic Terminator Squad, Terminator Assault Squad, or Terminator Squad, as we expect. So let's take a little looky at what can support these units. Well, captains can provide their rerolls, lieutenants can provide their rerolls. If you're teleporting in, your captains and lieutenants are going to have to bear that in mind and either teleport themselves, be on a bike where they can reach them, or have a jump pack and drop in. For that reason, I doubt the lieutenant will ever operate alongside these guys, but you never know, it might happen. Terminator Captain, he can be a nice little addition to the killing power, especially in melee of this unit, and Terminator Captains look cool as well. Oh, they can also have a Storm Shield, which gives them a 1-up save as well, which makes them really powerful. Librarians, again, if they can get close enough to use their powers to support a Terminator squad, you can potentially give them Veil of Time, which will give them a free reroll when it comes to charging in, which is great from a teleport strike. Might of Heroes, you're generally using it on a captain or maybe a dreadnought even, but again, it's something to bear in mind. The other powers, not so good for a Terminator squad. Chaplains, well, these are crucial. With Command and Oratory, it means that your chaplain can support your Terminators as they drop down and almost guaranteeing getting a charge off, especially if you can re-roll that charge roll. I think it goes up to something like 86% chance of getting in, which is amazing. Canticle of Hate, +2 to your charge rolls. That is an amazing ability, and you can use it outside the usual phase for when you teleport in. So charging in on a 7, thank you very much. In fact, it's because of that chaplain that makes a Terminator squad such a threatening proposition on the tabletop. It means that you can really assault an opponent's objective that they otherwise think is fairly safe. You can really make an attack on that tail gun line and really put a lot of pressure on them, and you can do it. And the opponent can't do anything about it other than trying to just deploy you out by putting units a little bit too far forward that stops you from getting close enough to the targets you want to do. But even then, that's an advantage for you. It's brilliant. Other characters that can really help your Terminator squad, well, Company Ancients and Chapter Ancients, they can do a little bit alright. I mean, again, they struggle to keep up. You'd have to put them in a drop pod if they're teleporting in. If they're close enough, then they can benefit from being able to have whatever magic banner that your army might have. I know that Deathwing have access to that sort of thing. And there is a Terminator Ancient who can drop in as standard. I actually have a really nicely converted one that my friend broke for me. And it's a way of putting the chapter banner bearer right close next to the Terminators. It's not necessarily needed though, depending on the size of the squad, which I'm going to go on to now. If you have a 5-man squad, then getting +1 attack across the board from the standard of Macragge in Violet, for example, is going to be really useful. If you use a larger squad like what I do, I use 10-man squad, and I'll go over that when I go over the stratagems of why that's important, then you don't really need that extra attack generally, and he often gets left behind and dies because you're trying to make sure the squad can get in. You got to remember the deployment rules if you've got a large squad. So it depends on what you're doing, but a Terminator Ancient can be a useful addition, particularly if you're going to have slightly smaller squads. But ultimately, I don't use one anymore. I find that he's a little bit surplus to requirements. Again, it depends on your build. You might have a 6 or 7 strong squad plus him, and then you find that you can use him more often. Lastly, you know him, you love him, the Apothecary / Chief Apothecary. He can bring models back from the dead like a Necromancer. What I love most about this dude is you can overcharge a Plasma Blaster, lose the Sergeant, not be too upset because you can get him back the next turn, thankfully, using a Combat Revival. Biggest weakness is how close is he going to be to your Terminator squads, particularly if they teleport strike in. So it's not the be all and end all of a strategy there, depending on how you use your Terminators, but it's a nice option to have. There's always someone else he can raise from the dead anyway, so it's not the end of the world. Transportation, I don't think there is any really relevant reason to take transports for 9th edition Terminators. They can teleport in for free, it's reliable, it's useful, and it's cheaper than taking a Land Raider or Storm Raven. And because of melter weapons, those vehicles aren't as good anymore. I hate to say it, absolutely love a Land Raider, but they're not worth taking, unfortunately, for your Terminator squads, which is a massive shame. Storm Raven, even more expensive than a Land Raider, even easier to kill. I just don't know what's going on there. I don't know why Games Workshop hates them so much. Anyway, moving on to stratagems, we have Fury the First, which gives +1 to hit for 1 command point for whatever phase they're making the attack roll. So you can use it in melee and shooting. You can use it twice a turn. It's really nice. It means that your bolter shots can potentially be hitting on a 2+, and your heavy weapons, when they're dropping in, if you're not an Ultramarine in Tactical Doctrine, can actually hit on a 3+. You got reroll 1s from a captain potentially, makes them a really accurate proposition against the opponent. Likewise, in melee, it's really crucial. If you're hitting on a 4+, you're going to notice a marked change in your combat potential, but if you're hitting on a 3+ with power fists, the opponent's going to be a bit worried. It's a really nice ability, and it becomes a 2+ with lightning claws. Makes your thunder hammers really powerful Terminator Assault squads. You can be hitting even a knight in close combat. You'll be hitting them on 3+, doing damage 3. It's a really nice ability. So Fury the First, absolutely stunning. And kind of nicely, you can use it on a Terminator captain as well. So you can use it on your Terminator squad to shoot something, get your Terminator captain into close combat using the right canticle of hate, and then uses Thunderhammer to squash something while the squad tears into it with lightning claws and hit on a 2+. It's really nice. The last stratagem to talk about that is relevant to most Space Marine supplements is the Honoured Sergeant stratagem, which is pretty good. It's whatever the equivalent is for your particular chapter. It means a sergeant can have a special issue war gear. It's usually your special bolt shell plus something else, because you're not going to be wasting bolter shells where you can only have one shot, etc. on just a Terminator. You're probably going to be using it for something really nice like Mastercrafted. Giving a Mastercrafted Thunderhammer, for example, to a Terminator Sergeant, which already has 3 wounds and a 1+ armor save, makes him quite survivable. It's like a mini character, and he's going to be doing damage 4. I like putting it on my Sergeant's Plasma Blaster in my Relic Terminator squad. Damage 3 shooting, oh my word, that catches people unawares. You're basically doing damage 3. It's a bit risky because you could blow yourself up, but I try and make sure that my Apothecary can get close at least a turn later, and it also depends on how you deploy the unit. Basically, it's a nice little addition to give a mini character into the army. It's a 3 wound, 2+ armor save, invulnerable save model. It's more worthwhile on one of those than, say, giving it to an Intercessor Sergeant who could die just very easily anyway. So it's a bit of a waste of a relic slot and command point in that regard. So lastly, I touched on it earlier, go big or go small. I mentioned earlier, you go small because you want to get more points into the army. You want to spread out across the table and take your objectives and score your points. It's a valid and good thing to do. You can also get more use out of something that will boost up the attack power of the squad, such as a relic banner of some sort, because the unit doesn't need it. However, it's not quite as survivable. Go big, well, you do have deployment issues. If you're over 5 models strong, you have to make sure that you've deployed in the right way, otherwise you lose models in the morale stage. That's fairly easy to do really with Space Marines. I've never had an issue with it. And crucially, when you use things like Fury the First, it works for the whole squad, every single model in the unit. When you use things such as Canticle of Hate or whatever ability from a Chaplain, again, it does the same thing. You might want to use Catechism of Fire so that those Stormbolter shots are going to be wounding on a 3+ against Space Marines. There's all sorts of reasons why you might do it, especially if you're fighting against Orcs and you want to wound them on a 4+ instead of a 5+ now. So a larger squad, it means that you have to change the way they operate. I mean, they've got a large footprint. They're not as easy to teleport in behind enemy lines, but they're more of a frontline proposition. You can put them right at the front of your army. Teleport right at the front line, and all of a sudden you've got something that is holding the middle of the table. It's also within range of your Apothecary, so it's quite relevant in that regard. So it changes the way you use the unit, and it changes them from either a utility choice that can support an attack somewhere to something that is a bit more of a frontline hardcore of your army. I'm just going to wrap it up there. Terminators are a great unit choice. I absolutely love them. They're fun to use on the tabletop, and they're very iconic for Space Marines. They've become quite a powerful choice. I don't think they're overpowered at all. Space Marines definitely haven't got that with regards to Terminators, but they are a very good choice still on the table. You can get a lot out of them. A bit more skilled to use at times because you have to choose the right place to teleport in. If you don't teleport in the right place, you often can waste their potential, particularly their assault potential. But the potential to take on an opponent's objectives off him when he least expects it or least wants it, it's worth a lot. It's worth a lot on the table, especially in 9th edition. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Love hearing from you guys. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please spread the word, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all soon. Peace out.